From your perspective, whether it's an Israeli perspective or a Middle East expert, do you see it otherwise?
Well, there's no good and beautiful scenario in the Middle East any way you look at it. I think there's a tendency by Mr. Galloway to romanticize a little bit about the period before the war. I mean, Iraq was not in a state of peace or tranquility at the time. I mean, people forget about the reign of terror of Saddam Hussein, what the casualties and the damage that he caused to the country, and what he did in Kuwait before. So, I mean, it's not a question between once there was a very beautiful and good Iraq, and then the United States stepped in and destroyed everything and brought the calamity to the Iraqi people. Yes, there is great suffering in Iraq, but this suffering is not a result of the American invasion, so to speak, in 2003. Rather, it's the result of the British Empire decision in 1923 to lump three groups together, which were at loggerheads before, and create the modern-day Iraq for the sake of Prince Faisal at the time. So we are going to put things in the proper perspective before we lament about the current condition and try to glorify the previous era that existed in Iraq.
The reality is, of course, Israel knew that Iraq was a threat, the only Arab country that was economically and militarily any kind of counterbalance to themselves, so they wanted it destroyed.
Are you going to take it lying down, Ranan Ghasina, these all accusations?
Well, you know, I'm amazed and flattered at the same time, you know, amazed about the lack of historical context of Mr. Galloway's analysis, and flattered by, you know, this conspiratorial theories. Israel is moving and shaking the Middle East. Israel does everything here. Look, this conspiratorial theory does not square with the facts and the reality. Israel did not attack Iraq. Iraq did attack Israel several times. Since 1948, Iraq participated in all of the Israeli-Arab wars. And Iraq was threatening Israel with missiles before Israel ever tried to threaten Iraq. We had no quarrel with Iraq. We don't have a common border with Iraq. There is an opportunity today out of the bleeding Iraq to come up with a new constitution with democracy, which is trying to make its way in Iraq. So something good will come out of it, but it's going to take a long time. And Iraq, unfortunately, will continue to bleed like other countries in the Middle East. They're trying to pave their way into the future rather than go back to the glorious past that Galloway so romanticizes about.
In a world that is replete with dictators and tyrants all over the place, what makes Iraq so special?
Wassam and Mr. Galloway, you forget the Iraq-Iran war. Well, who started, who instigated the Iraq war? It was Saddam Hussein.
America.
This is a megalomaniac who decided he wants to control the Middle East. Well, not America. Come on. You know, the worst thing, I say the primordial sin belongs to the British Empire,
Saddam
but the crimes that Mr. Galloway is committing by supporting terrorist organizations, that is the worst thing for the Middle East. The cause for bleeding, the Middle East is bleeding because people like Mr. Galloway in the West are supporting Hezbollah, are supporting Hamas, are supporting terrorist organizations, which are the cause for the bleeding of the Middle East. Israel did not create the Sunni-Shiite rift. Israel is the only country that has historical rights of being where it was, because it was here long before any of the Arab countries were there. And we have a right to live, and we want to live in peace. We're extending a hand to peace, but what we got from the Iraqis up to this time was only war. I hope that this thing will change in the future. But by supporting terrorist organizations like Hamas, like Hezbollah, Mr. Galloway is not promoting the cause of peace. He's turning the Middle East back into the worst situation that existed before. If the world is going to act according to George Galloway, the West is going to act according to George Galloway, they'll be paving the way for the new tyrants of the Middle East, not for democracy, not for secular regime. And therefore, you know, one must take cognizance of the fact and not try to deny history or warp history or switch history to its liking, because if he gives up on the democratic value for which the country, the United States and Great Britain, went to fight in the Middle East, then I think that really the West is doomed.